During the 10th century BCE, the Japanese archipelago experienced a massive wave of migration that permanently altered the lives of the indigenous inhabitants. For tens of thousands of years prior, these native groups survived solely by foraging, hunting, and gathering wild resources. These new immigrant groups traveling from the Korean peninsula introduced the revolutionary method of wet rice cultivation to the islands. Modern archaeology utilizes carbon-14 dating methods to determine the exact age of ancient charred rice grains. Carbon dating of organic remains recovered from the Itazuke archaeological site in Fukuoka Prefecture confirms that wet rice agriculture emerged much earlier than previously assumed. This scientific evidence establishes a new chronological beginning for the dynamic and transformative Yayoi period. Prior to the arrival of these continental migrants, members of the indigenous Jomon culture dominated the Japanese islands for over 10,000 years. These hunter-gatherers lived in semi-subterranean pit dwellings and manufactured characteristic earthenware pots decorated with cord-marked patterns. However, global climate fluctuations during the mid-first millennium BCE forced these communities to adapt to new environmental circumstances. Simple wooden boats traversed the rough waters of the Tsushima Strait to connect the Asian mainland with northern Kyushu in the south. On these maritime voyages, migrating families carried valuable wet rice seeds alongside essential production tools fashioned from stone and early metals. They selected wet coastal plains and low-lying marshes to build their permanent settlements and cultivate the very first rice paddies. Historians refer to these newly arrived continental immigrants as the Torajan people to distinguish them from the indigenous Jomon populations. These Torajan individuals possessed taller statures, longer, flatter facial structures, and advanced technological skills developed on the East Asian mainland. Their settlement in northern Kyushu initiated a phase of intense cultural exchange that spread across the southern Japanese islands. At the Nabata archaeological site located in Saga Prefecture, research teams uncovered the earliest physical evidence of small partition paddy fields. This agricultural layout featured water-retaining irrigation canals and wooden dams constructed systematically during the early Yayoi period. These important archaeological findings provide concrete proof that the early farmers possessed highly advanced water management and engineering capabilities. Agricultural workers during this transitional era carved heavy wooden hoes and spades to dig irrigation ditches and shape paddy borders. They wore oversized wooden clogs called tagada on their feet to prevent themselves from sinking deep into the thick mud during transplanting season. Managing these wet rice paddies required constant cooperation among the members of the entire village community. During the autumn harvest, early Yayoi farmers utilized semicircular stone knives with cored finger holes to reap mature rice stalks individually. This meticulous harvesting method allowed them to collect grain heads cleanly before processing the agricultural yield. They dried the harvested rice ears on outdoor wooden racks before transporting the grains to these elevated storage facilities. To protect the valuable grain harvest from humidity and rodent infestations, these early agriculturalists constructed elevated wooden storehouses. This unique architectural style utilized sturdy timber pillars to raise the main floor over 1 meter above the ground and featured specialized wooden rat guards. Archaeologists have subsequently discovered numerous foundations of these elevated granaries throughout Fukuoka Prefecture. The abundant supply of cultivated rice changed the dietary patterns of the inhabitants and stimulated rapid population growth. A reliable caloric intake from agricultural fields enabled families to support larger numbers of children compared to the foraging lifestyle of the Jomon period. Consequently, small farming hamlets in northern Kyushu expanded their territory and cleared surrounding areas for cultivation. Interaction between the native Jomon population and the incoming Torajan migrants occurred through direct trade routes and intermarriage. Modern genetic research confirms that contemporary Japanese populations carry genetic markers from both Jomon and Yayoi ancestors. The dual structure model formulated by anthropologist Hanahara Kazuro explains this complex genetic heritage as a long-term hybridization process between these two distinct groups. Archaeologists identified clear physical differences in skeletal remains discovered at the coastal Doigahama site in Yamaguchi Prefecture. The excavated skeletons dating to the Yayoi period display longer facial profiles, shallower eye sockets, and greater height compared to indigenous Jomon skeletons. These physical remains clearly demonstrate the biological transition taking place within the local population over several generations. The economic shift from hunting and foraging to wet rice cultivation reshaped the spiritual worldview of the ancient population in profound ways. Farming communities began organizing regular ritual ceremonies dedicated to agricultural deities to secure favorable weather patterns and abundant grain harvests. Consequently, seasonal sowing festivals in spring and Thanksgiving rituals in autumn became central elements of the emerging Yayoi cultural landscape across the country. In addition to agricultural development, Yayoi pottery production techniques reached a level of refinement distinct from earlier historical periods. Yayoi ceramics featured thinner walls, smoother burnished surfaces, and were fired at significantly higher temperatures than Jomon wares. Artisans produced distinctive red-orange earthenware jars specifically designed to store this seed rice and protect it from insect pests. Wet rice farming spread rapidly from northern Kyushu along the coastal regions bordering the Seto Inland Sea. Moving along major river valleys, this revolutionary agricultural technology penetrated deep into the fertile Kanto Plain located in the eastern region of Honshu. This migration of farming populations and corresponding transfer of technology continued across the entire Japanese archipelago for several centuries. In Shizuoka Prefecture to the east, the famous Toro archaeological site reveals the complete structure of a prehistoric farming village. This important site contains well-preserved remains of rectangular rice fields, separated by thick wooden dividing planks. The waterlogged alluvial soil at Toro preserved various organic wooden tools and structural elements from natural decomposition for over 2 millennia. Prehistoric residents at the Toro site built complex drainage ditches and inlets to regulate the water depth in individual rice paddies. They drove long split-plank wooden stakes into the mud to reinforce paddy embankments against erosion during typhoons and heavy summer rains. These systematic excavations demonstrate that ancient farmers developed a highly sophisticated understanding of local hydrology. Alongside wet rice cultivation, the introduction of bronze and iron metallurgy triggered a massive technological revolution in the Japanese archipelago. Local metalworkers imported raw materials and finished metal items from the Korean peninsula before establishing independent casting workshops in Japan. Craftsmen utilized iron primarily to manufacture sharp tools, while dedicating bronze to ceremonial and ritual objects. The Karakokagi archaeological site in Nara Prefecture served as a major industrial center for bronze casting and ceramic manufacturing. Archaeologists working at this site excavated numerous clay molds utilized to cast bronze axes and ritual bells. The impressive scale of production at this central settlement indicates a high degree of specialized division of labor in early Yayoi society. Distinctive bronze bells known as dataku emerged as the primary ritual objects for farming communities during the Yayoi period. Local artisans decorated the flat surfaces of these bells with simple linear carvings depicting hunting scenes, agricultural tasks, and elevated wooden granaries. Villagers subsequently buried these precious bells on remote hillsides located outside the outer borders of their settlements. At the Kajindani archaeological site in Shimen Prefecture, researchers discovered 358 bronze swords buried neatly in the ground. This unexpected discovery in 1984 revealed that the scale of ceremonial activity in ancient Japan was far greater than previously suspected. These bronze swords featured wide blades designed specifically for public display and sacred ceremonial rituals. The rapid acquisition of iron metallurgy accelerated the clearing of dense forests to create expansive flatlands for wet rice cultivation. Sharp iron axes allowed Yayoi communities to fell large trees to build houses and construct wooden watercraft for river transport. These iron tools rapidly replaced the polished stone implements that had dominated the islands during the Jomon period. The steady accumulation of surplus grain from wet rice cultivation initiated social stratification and wealth inequality within formerly egalitarian communities. Individuals who controlled crucial irrigation networks and large communal granaries gradually emerged as elite political rulers of these early settlements. Large clay burial jars called kamekin containing precious bronze goods confirm the development of distinct social hierarchies among the local inhabitants. Tribal chieftains consolidated their regional political authority by actively acquiring prestigious imported items, such as polished bronze mirrors from the mainland. These chieftains utilized these reflective bronze discs as sacred ceremonial devices to communicate with ancestral spirits during communal agricultural rituals. Consequently, political leadership and religious authority merged during this period, establishing the historical foundations of early dynastic rule in Japan. Small tribal alliances gradually coalesced into early regional polities, referred to as kuni in ancient Chinese historical chronicles of the era. Each kuni consisted of several farming villages grouped together to defend their vital irrigation water and agricultural land. Growing competition over fertile valleys and copper resources led to frequent organized warfare and armed clashes across the island of Honshu. The Yashinagari archaeological site in Saga Prefecture represents the largest fortified settlement discovered from the Yayoi period in Japan. A double ring of deep dry moats and high palisade fences made of sharpened wooden logs enclosed this vast hilltop complex. This heavily protected enclosure served as the primary administrative seat for ruling elites and garrison soldiers of the region. At the Yashinagari settlement, builders erected wooden watchtowers exceeding 10 meters in height at strategic corners of the outer palisade. The construction of these military observation posts indicates that the threat of interregional warfare remained constant in early Yayoi society. Armed sentries utilized long wooden bows and arrows to defend the settlement from incoming regional raiders. Excavations at the Yashinagari site uncovered numerous human skeletons, showing trauma from bronze arrowheads embedded in their bones. Several of these unearthed remains were missing skulls, illustrating the brutal nature of conflicts over arable land and water access. Intergroup warfare became a regular occurrence as regional populations competed to secure their agricultural livelihood on the island. Despite these frequent regional conflicts, trade between different regions of the Japanese islands expanded significantly via riverways and coastal routes. Yayoi merchants hollowed out massive logs to construct large dugout canoes capable of carrying rice, sea salt, and pottery. Distinctive pottery designs originating in Kyushu have been excavated at archaeological sites located as far north as northern Honshu. Maritime trade networks connecting Kyushu with the Asian mainland operated continuously throughout the Middle Yayoi period. For instance, archaeologists discovered Chinese bronze coins minted by the short-lived Xin dynasty under Wang Mang at various locations in Japan. These numismatic findings confirm that local leaders engaged in direct economic transactions with active continental merchant networks. The Chinese Book of Han, compiled in the 1st century BCE, records that the land of Wa contained over 100 distinct polities. This dynastic chronicle represents the earliest written record, documenting the existence of the inhabitants of the Japanese archipelago. These small coastal states sent regular diplomatic missions to Lelang Commandery to trade and pay tribute to China. In the year 57 CE, the ruler of Na, a small state within Wa, dispatched a formal diplomatic embassy to China. Emperor Guangwu of the Han dynasty presented this envoy with a solid gold seal inscribed with 5 Chinese characters. This precious imperial gift was subsequently lost for centuries before its accidental rediscovery by local farmers in 1784. An agricultural laborer accidentally discovered that historical gold seal on Shikinashima Island in modern Fukuoka Prefecture. The underside of this official seal bears the official inscription identifying the bearer as king of the Na state of Wa, vassal of the Han dynasty. This priceless archaeological artifact is currently preserved in the permanent collection of the Fukuoka City Museum. Receiving imperial investiture from the Han emperor elevated the prestige and domestic authority of the Na rulers over neighboring chieftains on the island. They utilized this foreign political backing and luxury items like Chinese silks to attract and secure regional alliances. The concentration of political power on the archipelago became increasingly pronounced during this late Han period. By the 2nd century CE, the delicate political balance among the small states collapsed into widespread civil war. The Chinese Chronicle Records of Wei documents this turbulent historical period as the Great Disturbance of Hua, which lasted for several decades. Rival alliances fought continuously to control primary river valleys and access to vital metal imports from the peninsula. The devastating civil war ended only when several regional chieftains united to install a female shaman named Queen Himiko as their supreme ruler. Queen Himiko established her administrative center in the state of Yamatai and utilized religious authority to unify the warring factions. She lived in seclusion within a fortified palace, guarded constantly by 100 armed soldiers. In the year 239, Queen Himiko dispatched a diplomatic delegation to the Cao Wei court in China. Emperor Cao Rui received the envoys warmly and bestowed upon Queen Himiko the gold title of Queen of Hua, friendly to Wei. The emperor also gifted her 100 bronze mirrors to distribute to subordinate regional rulers in Japan. The distribution of these Wei bronze mirrors bolstered the sacred status and political legitimacy of Queen Himiko across Yamatai. Chieftains used these mirrors as ritual items in agricultural ceremonies and placed them inside the graves of deceased leaders. Modern archaeological excavations have recovered numerous mirrors of this specific Chinese, designed from Yayoi burial mounds. The elaborate agricultural ceremonies conducted during the reign of Queen Himiko provided the structural basis for early Shinto ritual practices in Japan. Yayoi communities believed that every grain of rice possessed a sacred spirit called yukonomatama that required respect and purification rituals. This integration of farming cycles and religious authority formed the central pillar of political administration. Alongside wet rice cultivation, Yayoi communities domesticated small animals such as pigs and hunting dogs to supplement their daily diet. Animal remains excavated at the Karakokagi site bear clear butcher marks made with sharp metal blades. Even with this animal domestication, intensive grain agriculture remained the primary source of food for the entire population on Honshu. The introduction of wooden loom weaving technology transformed clothing production methods during the mid-Yayoi period. Archaeologists recovered numerous clay spindle whorls used to spin threaded sites throughout Saga Prefecture. These important technological discoveries indicate that people gradually transitioned from wearing animal skins to wearing simple garments made of woven hemp fibers. The daily lives of Yayoi villagers revolved entirely around the seasonal growth cycle of the domestic rice plant. Early farmers observed shifts in weather patterns and the alignment of constellations to determine when to flood their paddies. This sedentary agricultural lifestyle required cooperative labor and established strong social bonds within each local community of Honshu. Operating these complex canal systems required families to share water resources and coordinate heavy labor during the transplanting season. Community leaders regularly met in village councils to resolve water disputes and organize the clearing of main channels. This self-governing social structure developed as a direct result of the collective demands of wet rice cultivation. The relentless expansion of agricultural land dramatically altered the natural geography of the Japanese islands over several centuries. Wet marshes and forested floodplains in Kyushu and the Kinki region were systematically converted into neat networks of rectangular paddies. Human communities actively modified their physical environment to establish a highly productive agricultural landscape for the future. Settling in low-lying river valleys exposed Yayoi communities to the constant hazard of seasonal flooding and water damage. Excavations at multiple archaeological sites revealed thick layers of river silt covering ancient paddy fields. Following these natural disasters, the entire village had to cooperate to clear the canals and rebuild damaged wooden embankments to save crops. The steady growth of wet rice farming led to the development of systematic trade networks across the southern provinces of Japan. Early merchants cleared paths to connect inland agricultural settlements with local river ports for long-distance grain transport. In these transactions, rice served as both a primary food staple and a standardized unit of currency for the local populations. The transition from Jomon culture to Yayoi culture was a gradual process of integration that took place over many generations. In the mountainous regions of northern Honshu, the hunting and foraging lifestyle of the Jomon people persisted for several centuries. Cultural assimilation occurred at different speeds, depending on the geographic features of each individual province. Several Jomon groups living in the northern districts adopted rice cultivation, but practiced dry field farming on hillsides. This clever adaptation created unique agricultural practices suited to the cooler climate of the Tohoku region. Archaeological excavations in Tohoku have recovered ancient charred rice grains that are significantly smaller than specimens found in southern Kyushu sites. During the late Yayoi period, the proliferation of iron tools accelerated the development of specialized craft production in many settlements. Artisans utilized sharp iron knives and chisels to construct large dugout canoes and build sturdier elevated granaries. This advancement in metallurgy allowed local communities to achieve self-sufficiency in tool production without relying on continental imports. The use of large clay burial jars for adults declined and was replaced by earth-mound tombs with circular or square plans. This significant shift in mortuary customs reflects major changes in social organization and ancestral worship practices. These early mounds served as the direct architectural predecessor to the massive keyhole tombs of the subsequent Kofun period. During subsequent centuries, the cultural integration between indigenous populations and continental migrants reached completion in most regions of the country. The language spoken by Yayoi farmers gradually became the linguistic foundation for Old Japanese, which spread throughout the islands. Basic vocabulary terms relating to wet rice farming and agricultural tools began to standardize during this era. Modern genetic analyses of ancient skeletal remains reveal a unique distribution of DNA markers among modern Japanese individuals today. Jomon genetic ancestry remains highly concentrated in the Ainu population of Hokkaido and the Ryukyuan population of Okinawa. Conversely, residents of Honshu exhibit high percentages of genetic markers associated with Yayoi migrants from the Asian mainland. At the Otsu archaeological site in Shiga Prefecture, research teams excavated the remains of specialized textile workshops from the Yayoi period. Workers utilized flat wooden beaters with longitudinal grooves to extract fibers from wild hemp plants for weaving cloth. Garments from this period were often dyed using pigments extracted from native plants like madder and indigo. Yayoi communities developed simple musical instruments crafted from wood and clay to perform during communal agricultural ceremonies. Excavators at the Toro site recovered a primitive four-stringed wooden zither, which represents the direct ancestor of the traditional ko. Musicians played these stringed instruments to invite the deities to protect the rice crops from insects and droughts. Ancestor worship and the veneration of individuals who cleared the wilderness for cultivation emerged as central religious practices in Yayoi, Japan. Families constructed large graves for deceased chieftains on elevated ridges overlooking the communal rice paddies. Villagers believed that the spirits of these ancestors would remain in the area to safeguard the crops from droughts and pests. Successfully cultivating wet rice required highly accurate forecasting of seasonal weather changes throughout the calendar year. Ancient farmers observed the leafing cycles of deciduous oak trees and tracked the arrival of migratory birds to schedule seed sowing. These observations accumulated into a body of agricultural knowledge passed down through generations of local cultivators. To prepare the muddy soil for planting, Yayoi laborers dragged heavy wooden rakes to level the surface of the flooded field. They piled dirt around the edges of the plots to construct low retaining dikes to prevent precious water from draining away. This labor-intensive soil preparation demanded the active physical participation of all household members. Yayoi cultivators soaked their seed rice in warm water before sowing the grains in dedicated nursery beds. Once the young seedlings reached about 20 centimeters in height, workers carefully transplanted them into the main flooded paddies. This precise cultivation process required great patience and manual dexterity, which was often performed by female workers in the community. Farmers diverted water into their fields from nearby streams through a network of manually dug irrigation channels. Yayoi communities manufactured thick wooden sluice gates to regulate the water depth in response to different growth phases of the rice plants. This water management system allowed communities to maximize their grain yields during the autumn harvest season. Families settled permanently in one location for generations, abandoning the older lifestyle of migrating across forests in search of wild game. Multiple generations began residing together under the same roof, within larger semi-subterranean pit dwellings in the village. This major shift in residential habits actively promoted the development of closely knit local community units. Archaeological excavations have uncovered refuse heaps containing marine shells and fish bones near coastal Yayoi settlements in Japan. These discoveries indicate that despite their heavy reliance on cultivated rice, Yayoi people maintained active fishing practices to supplement their diet. Fishermen manufactured woven hemp nets weighted with small clay sinkers to catch fish in shallow bays. At the Takendono site in Saga Prefecture, researchers excavated thick wooden planks belonging to ocean-going vessels. These structural planks featured mortise holes designed to bind the ship frame together using flexible vines to withstand rough sea waves. These sturdy ships enabled Yayoi communities to maintain regular trade contacts with the Korean peninsula and mainland China. The introduction of intensive agriculture altered traditional concepts of land ownership among the ancient inhabitants of Japan. Arable fields ceased to be communal resources and came under the direct control of powerful kinship clans that cleared the wilderness. These clans marked the boundaries of their respective territories by digging deep drainage ditches and canals. Yayoi chieftains utilized cast bronze dataku bells to assert their political power over the agricultural population in the region. The ringing of these bells during sacred ceremonies served as a command from local deities to assemble the villagers for communal work. When ruling lineages collapsed due to war, these bells were buried in remote caches. Bronze casting technology during this historical period required raw metal ingots imported directly from the Korean peninsula. Maritime traders transported copper and tin ingots across the sea before local craftsmen melted them in clay crucibles. Artisans carefully controlled furnace temperatures to achieve the correct alloy fluidity required for casting complex molds. In addition to casting bronze, Yayoi blacksmiths forged raw iron imported from the peninsula to manufacture sharp weapons, including daggers and arrowheads. These iron arrowheads possess superior penetration power and rapidly replaced the polished stone projectiles that had been used during the preceding Jomon period. This development of iron weaponry significantly increased the scale and violence of local conflicts between neighboring provinces. At several Yayoi sites, archaeologists excavated fragments of wooden armor manufactured from small flat planks laced together with cords. Defensive armor of this type was specifically designed to protect the chest and back of warriors from sharpened bamboo arrows during combat. This defensive equipment represents a standard feature of military forces belonging to these early regional kuni. Excavating deep water-filled moats around Yayoi settlements served to deter hostile neighboring clans and prevent wild boars from invading agricultural areas. These defensive trenches often exceeded 2 meters in depth and contained sharpened bamboo stakes driven into the bottom to maximize protection. This specific design style turned agricultural villages into fortified strongholds that could easily withstand prolonged military sieges. Social organization in Yayoi communities grew increasingly complex as labor specialization developed alongside intensive wet rice farming. In addition to primary agricultural workers, specialized groups of bronze casters, iron blacksmiths, and pottery makers emerged within the population. These craft specialists established independent workshops located on the periphery of the main residential areas of these larger settlements. Yayoi earthenware vessels served functional household purposes like cooking and grain storage, and also functioned as coffins for burying deceased individuals. This practice of using large clay burial jars called kaimkin became extremely common in northern Kyushu during the Middle Yayoi period. Families placed the deceased in a tightly flexed position inside 2 joined clay jars before burial. These pottery coffin jars were typically buried in organized communal cemeteries, established outside the residential boundaries of Yayoi villages. Excavations of these kaimkin graves have recovered valuable mortuary gifts, including imported shell bracelets and glass beads. The obvious differences in the quantity and quality of these grave goods indicate the social status of the deceased within the clan. The steady accumulation of surplus agricultural wealth enabled the development of ornamental arts and long-distance trade during the Yayoi period. Elite members of society manufactured decorative bracelets from large tropical seashells imported from the Ryukyu Islands. The possession of these exotic seashell ornaments remained strictly restricted to high-status chieftains to demonstrate their political influence over the village. Decorative patterns engraved on Yayoi pottery vessels and bronze dataku bells reflect the close relationship between ancient agricultural communities and their natural surroundings. Artisans incised linear drawings depicting waterbirds, wild deer, and hunters paddling dugout canoes onto these clay surfaces. These symbolic representations were directly connected to fertility rituals, designed to ensure a successful wet rice harvest each year. The geographical center of political power began shifting from northern Kyushu eastward to the Kinki region during the late Yayoi period. The fertile plains of modern Nara and Osaka prefectures offered expansive areas for large-scale wet rice irrigation systems. These central locations became the homeland of the most powerful tribal coalitions on the Japanese islands during this era. These regional coalitions in the Kinki region constructed larger wooden buildings than those found in earlier agricultural villages. Excavations at the Karakokagi site in Nara Prefecture revealed massive wooden pillars that supported multi-story structures. This monumental architecture demonstrates the advanced construction techniques that directly preceded the development of permanent imperial palaces in Japan. During the 3rd century CE, Yayoi society achieved its peak in terms of technological capability and regional political organization. The widespread implementation of wet rice agriculture transformed the Japanese islands into a landscape dominated by permanent farming communities. The foraging lifestyle of the Jomon period became a distant memory for the agricultural inhabitants of Honshu. Although formal writing was not yet established on the archipelago, simple symbols incised on bronze items indicate early symbolic communication. Yayoi communities utilized basic linear drawings to mark property ownership on farming tools and storage containers. These simple visual markers represent the initial steps toward the adoption of written scripts during the subsequent historical periods of Japan. Diplomatic relations with the Chinese court introduced advanced scientific and technical knowledge to the ruling class of Wa. Early astronomical charts and land surveying techniques arrived in the archipelago through official embassies visiting the mainland. This imported knowledge helped local administrators organize seasonal irrigation schedules and improve the productivity of agricultural fields. The growth of the agricultural economy stimulated the emergence of proto-urban trading centers surrounding major Yayoi settlements. Active markets developed along major riverways, where dugout canoes transported goods between inland villages and coastal ports. Farmers regularly traded surplus rice, sea salt, and woven fabrics as primary commodities in these early commercial transactions. Agricultural procedures became standardized through edicts issued by the ruling chieftains of regional tribal alliances. Farmers had to follow strict communal schedules for planting and harvesting to prevent the waste of shared water resources. This coordination of agricultural labor permanently reinforced the political control of the elite chieftains over their respective territories during the middle of the Yayoi period. The conclusion of the Yayoi period was marked by the gradual decline of the Dataku bronze bell ritual tradition. Instead of casting these bells, regional polities began concentrating their economic resources on constructing monumental earthen burial mounds for their deceased rulers. This significant transition in mortuary practices indicates a centralization of political power in ancient Japan. The introduction of wet rice farming into the fertile valleys of northern Kyushu permanently altered the course of Japanese history. The islands of the archipelago transitioned from a territory inhabited by nomadic hunter-gatherers into a sedentary agricultural society. This new socio-economic foundation prepared the political landscape for the rise of the early Yamato state in central Honshu during the 4th century. The ancient partitioned field systems excavated at the Itazuke site continue to provide valuable information to modern agricultural historians. The water management methods and canal construction techniques developed by Yayoi farmers remain highly visible in contemporary Japanese rice cultivation. These ancient practices developed thousands of years ago still influence the daily work of modern rural communities. Ancient agricultural ceremonies originating in the Yayoi period continue to be observed by the Japanese imperial court today. The annual harvest ritual known as Ni'inamesai is performed personally by the emperor to offer newly harvested rice to the deities. This solemn court ceremony represents a direct continuation of Yayoi agricultural traditions, spanning more than 2 millennia. Modern archaeological research conducted at the Yashinagari site continues to clarify the origins of the Japanese people. The weapons and tools excavated from the soil provide clear physical evidence of the daily struggles of these prehistoric communities. The massive migration of Yayoi populations established the foundational genetic and cultural patterns of the nation. Climate fluctuations during the late 1st millennium BCE accelerated the wave of sea-crossing migrations to the Japanese archipelago. Norwegian immigrants possessing metallurgical knowledge arrived at Hakata Bay and quickly established the earliest ironworking workshops in Kyushu. This combination of fertile coastal soil and continental technology initiated a major technological shift in Japan. Archaeological teams have reconstructed several elevated wooden storehouses at the Yashinagari Historical Park in Saga Prefecture. The steeply pitched thatched roofs and elevated timber platforms of these Yayoi granaries show clear adaptation to the humid climate of Japan. This structural design served as the architectural prototype for subsequent Shinto shrines. The Chinese text Records of Wei describes that the people of Wa practiced scapulomancy by heating deer shoulder bones over a fire. Shaman priests interpreted the resulting cracks on the bone surfaces to divine fortunes before starting the rice sowing or launching military campaigns. This reliance on divination represents a characteristic feature of late Yayoi society. The discovery of sandstone casting molds at the Nabata site demonstrates that local artisans developed independent metallurgical capabilities. Yayoi craftsmen learned to mix copper and tin in precise ratios to produce highly durable bronze alloys. This domestic production significantly reduced the reliance of these Western communities on metal imports from the Korean peninsula. Iron sickles excavated in Fukuoka Prefecture represent a significant advancement in harvesting technology during the late Yayoi period. Instead of using stone knives to cut individual ears, farmers used these iron tools to reap entire rice stalks rapidly near the roots. This change in tool material greatly increased agricultural productivity across the entire region. The practice of burying the deceased in large earthenware kamkin jars reflects the complex spiritual beliefs of Yayoi communities. Relatives buried these clay jars carefully under protective layers of yellow soil to shield the remains from environmental damage. This burial tradition clearly expresses their beliefs regarding the transition of human spirits into the ancestral realm. Prominent anthropologist Hanahara Kazuro demonstrated that genetic hybridization between the indigenous Jomon inhabitants and the incoming Yayoi immigrant populations occurred over several centuries. This interbreeding process was most intense in the low-lying coastal plains, where wet rice agriculture expanded rapidly. The genetic profile of the modern Japanese population resulted from this long-term biological integration of both lineages. The discovery of ancient Chinese coins like the wushu currency at the Yashinagari site confirms long-distance maritime trade connections. Local chieftains exchanged domestic agricultural surplus for luxury prestige goods and bronze mirrors manufactured by the Han Dynasty court. Ancient Japanese elite members often wore these square-holed coins as personal protective ornaments or buried them in graves. Yayoi warriors carried large rectangular wooden shields decorated with red and black geometric patterns to defend themselves during intervillage battles. Linear carvings on bronze dataku bells depict soldiers exchanging shots with wooden longbows from behind wooden barricades. Constructing defensive fortifications and palisades became a primary concern for these farming communities to secure their precious grain supply. The standardized grid pattern of rectangular rice paddies introduced during the Yayoi period established the foundation for regional land planning in Japan. This agricultural layout featured integrated water management systems with wooden sluices, canals, and reservoirs distributing water to each individual plot. These structured fields demonstrate the engineering skill of early societies in organizing their space. The fertile Saga Plain has maintained its stable agricultural landscape since the initial reclamation of the region during the Yayoi period. The continuous cultivation of wet rice across 25 centuries ensured the long-term stability of regional farming communities in southwestern Japan. Rice remains the primary agricultural crop and a central element in imperial court ceremonies today. The historical transition from the Jomon to the Yayoi cultural phase occurred as a gradual process of hybridization that integrated both lineages. The hunting traditions of the indigenous population integrated with the collective labor discipline required for wet rice farming. This combination of lifestyles shaped the unique social characteristics of these early communities on Honshu. Inside ancient Yayoi graves, modern archaeologists frequently find imported bronze mirrors placed directly adjacent to the head of the deceased. This mortuary ritual reflected deep spiritual beliefs concerning the protective qualities of polished bronze reflections in the journey to the afterlife. These metal discs served as prestigious symbols of spiritual power for the buried tribal chieftains. The deep dry moats surrounding the Yashinagari site have been carefully excavated and partially filled with water to recreate the prehistoric landscape. This defensive design of concentric trenches and wooden palisades directly influenced the layout of medieval castles constructed in Japan during later centuries. The early development of defensive walls began with these Yayoi settlement fortifications. The simple wooden shovels and clay jars recovered from the Nabata site document the arrival of wet rice agriculture in Japan. Charred grains preserved beneath thick clay layers provide clear physical evidence of the daily efforts of these early farmers. These important archaeological remains mark the transition of the entire archipelago toward a settled farming civilization.